ว้าวซิกแพคแต่ตอนเช้าไม่ได้ตะโกนเท่าไหร่เธอเพราะว่ามันเช้าอยู่
ตะโกนทั้งวันเอา
รา No, wonderful, nice to meet you.
เดี๋ยวก็ไปตัดเองเอาไปเคาะ
Yeah. I am coming, everyone. I am here coming. Okay. Time to eat. Nice to meet you, everyone. Today I have this sticky guys. Yay. Yo, music come.
Sometimes I get so mad, there's no controlling me. My thoughts get so bad, I'm like,
Yeah.
I might grab at that, I don't know. My rap, my blood boils over like, oh God, here goes. I gotta stop feeling from my head to my toes. You say some shit that I can't let go, so just stay tuned for the rest of the show. So have you ever felt betrayed? Just how
อันนี้ไม่ต้องใส่ถั่วแล้วนะถั่วแล้วเอาไปเอา
Wow.
Cause I know you got me fucked up.
Ah.
Cause enough is enough. I'll take a face full of pavement just to make a statement. I know there's no turning back. Oh God, adrenaline wasted, so mad I can taste it. I know there's no turning back.
Hey.
I'll do what it takes, I ain't making mistakes like that. I'll bleed on your face to make it go take it back. I'll lose my shit, I go crazy when I'm mad. And now you don't wish you would shut the fuck up real bad. And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back. And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back. Never find the time to see how this rivalry becomes a dynasty. Oh God, adrenaline racing, so mad I can taste it. I know there's no turning back. I'll do what it takes, I ain't making mistakes like that. I'll put it on your face to make you go take it back. I'll lose my shit and go crazy when I'm mad. And then go wish you shut the fuck up real bad. And now that I'm gone, I know there's no turning back. And now that I'm gone, I know there's no turning back. Girl, you got me shook from the way your body looks. Got me riding hooks, got me feeling like a rug. I don't do it by the book, but for you I'll take a look. Don't know what your mama took, sweet and spicy like a cook, yeah. I'll keep it real, let's make a deal. Buy you a meal if you just let me feel. Get out your heels, grab on the wheel. Back to my place at the top of the hill. Don't have regrets, I know what's next. She need a fresh, I'll be back in a sec. Look at them legs, don't make me beg. Back to the room, let me show you my bed. Your body feels like taking on a drug. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb. Everything you do, I can't seem to get enough. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb. Touching on your body feels like taking on a drug. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb. Everything you do, I can't seem to get enough. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb. I could look at you all day, watch the way them hips sway. Love your body, so I pray. Don't you dare take it away. Can't control what I say. Lost my mind, cause you're flame. Hey, girl, what's your name? Lit me up just like a flame. Body emotion, I feel the commotion. Beyond you like lotion. I'm honest and broken. I flow like the ocean. I feel you were chosen to fix me. I'm broken. My heart that you stolen. Hey, stay with me, play with me, play with me. Hate to see when you get chemistry. Feels like it's destiny. I just want you laying next to me. And I really don't want you to test me. On your body feels like taking on a drug. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb. Everything you do, I can't seem to get enough. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb. Touching on your body feels like taking on a drug. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb. Everything you do, I can't seem to get enough. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb.
10
Yeah, let's go. I'm unstoppable, do the impossible. I'm irresponsible, yet I'm phenomenal. I got an arsenal, I'm dropping bombs, you know. No one might stop it, no. Conquer the obstacle. To the top, here I go, think I'm chosen to be the king of rock. Think the people are spoken. I can hear the tick tock of the clock. I'm in motion, so now I'm gonna pop, causing all this commotion. Yeah. Sometimes I think that I'm unstoppable. Yeah, ready to go, man, lock and load. That's right. I swear to God that I could drop you, bro. Yeah, I got a shot and I'm unstoppable. That's how I know that I'm unstoppable. That's how I know that I'm unstoppable. Yeah, let's go. I don't care what they all say. That's right. I'ma do this thing my way. Let's go. They grinding hard on it all day. We work hard, then we all attract an addiction to the fact that we're winning, still relax. Something's missing, need a track that is hitting, making cracks, making millions. Yeah, that's the mission. Don't waste time, no, I make time. All these people wanna hate, fine, I'ma make mine. While you sitting there complaining, I'll be training. While you sitting there just waiting, I'm creating. Yeah. Sometimes I think that I'm unstoppable.
อะโวคาโดมันไม่มีสีอะเธอ
Yeah. Ready to go, man. Lock and load. That's right. I swear to God that I could drop it, bro. Yeah. I got a shot and I ain't stopping, no. That's how I know that I'm unstoppable. That's how I know that I'm unstoppable. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4 steps I take from my bed to the floor. 5, 6, 7, 8. Will today be rough or will today be great? 9, 10, 11, 12. Lately I've been going through hell. 13, 14, 15, 16. Today's the day. Are you coming? Are you sick of being normal? I'm sick of being average. I'm sick of being mortal. I'm about to be a savage. I see a lot of things that I want. I will have them. I got a new mindset that I just established. I'll march through the cold with the nails on the pavement. I'll shovel that coal just to get out the basement. My story will be told, helping others make changes. I'll be so bold they will watch in amazement. I'm gonna face it. I'm gonna chase it. I'm gonna start over and keep waiting. Time is limited, quickly fading. My right is my time, you take it. I'm gonna face it. I'm gonna chase it. I'm gonna start over and keep waiting. Time is limited, quickly fading. My right is my time, you take it. I will never settle, got my foot up on the pedal, pushing hard to the metal, make a deal with the devil, channel rage through my vessel, into something that is special, energy of a rebel, going up a level, I just wanna be greatness, I can feel the changes, turn a new page and tie up my laces, I will be the bravest, break out of my cages, I will not be nameless, I will not be aimless.
แบ็คก็จีบเลย Yo. Apple cider. Cinnamon. รี่
Life is still the same. Ain't nobody gonna change. Everybody stays the same. So be different, make a name, I keep on moving forward. Always getting closer. I'm marching till it's over. And just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward.
คนโทรมาป่ะ
Always getting closer. Marching till it's over. Just like a soldier.
เบอร์02นี่นะพ่อ
อ๋อชินเจอร์ เอ็มดิก้า Curcumin Finger root What to Pova
Marching till it's over. And just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward. Always getting closer. Marching till it's over. Just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward. Always getting closer. Marching till it's over. Just like a soldier.
โอเค This is called ultimate veggie This is my banana chocolate banana pudding and mixed fruit berry drinking
Let's go. I ain't the first with the curse, with the burst that I wanna be better, not worse, man, it hurts. I'm on the search of my words and I put them all together, insert, cause I wanna have words. Working hella hard till they put me in the dirt. Gonna go far, man, listen to my words. Gonna be a star, man, life's like a blur. When you're working this hard, yeah, you get the closer, yeah. I ain't taking a backseat, I'm passing. Anybody else who is rapping, I'm nasty. Ain't nobody able to catch me, they gasping. They cannot compare, they can't match me, I'm at half speed. I got your girl and she laughing and dancing. Hanging on my butt, she asking to crash with me. Smash with me, she savage, she wants cash money. And she knows that I live lavishly. I wanna cold inside. Give all I have just to feel alive. I fight to live, I fight to strive. One day I'll have what I want. I want the whole world in the palm of my hand. I got a plan, I'm the man now. I'm teaching the game, a veteran, better than anybody else who tests me. I'm ready, looking in my hand and it's empty. I'm trending, ascending and blending, bending. Now I'm spreading and getting my name out now. Yeah, you hear me? All the crowds repping the sound. I'm hitting the ground, running up and coming. Ain't nothing, yeah, rookie of the year. I'ma keep it 100, cold-blooded, no budget. From nothing to something, I ain't bluffing. I got a full hand and a full plan. I ain't gonna stop till I'm at the top, man. Every single drop got me feeling awesome. I'm about to pop, started from the bottom, yeah. I wanna live, I'm cold inside. Give all I have just to feel alive. I fight to live, I fight to strive. One day I'll have what I want in life.
เออค่ะ
savage. My life is a little graphic, like HBO making magic. I'm rapping to make that passive money coming from traffic. Doing mental gymnastics, I'm fluid and problematic. You lose it if you come at me the wrong way. I've come a long way from sipping on Bombay. It's 1942 now, when it's loud now. Sipping hard in the back of a booth, sold out. I can never get enough. Success is like a drug. The money come in, but then I want more stuff. So I gotta work hard, play harder, gotta work smarter. Time is money, yeah, money is harder. So I'm not giving up, no, I'm not giving in. I was born in this world, I swear to make a difference. If you need a mentor, I got something for you, kid. Just watch the way I move and try your best to copy it. Like a CEO, I move like an athlete pro. I party like a rock star show. I live every day like my last ever know. I run it like a CEO. I move like an athlete pro. I party like a rock star show. I live every day like my last ever know. I run it like a CEO.
เราเขาต้องเลยครับ ต้มผักนะ
นักร้อง
เออ
Life, it gives you a chance for greatness, and you can waste it, or you can take it. Take control of your fate and chase it. I've been running towards dreams since I was just a kid. I've been held down, held back, hated. I've been pissed off, mad, frustrated. I've been loved, admired, and finally made it to the other side where I realized something sacred. It's not about what anyone else thinks of me. It's all about how I live. What's my legacy? Am I happy? Did I give? Looking everything, or did I hold back? Scared of all the uncertainty. I think differently. That's why I'm different. See, that's what I'm.
นะฮะ and microphone is this particular
that you have to eat sugar and carbohydrate in order to generate. Hello, health champions. Isn't it funny how some people say that you have to eat sugar and carbohydrate in order to generate blood sugar for your brain? And yet there are a lot of people who eat zero carbohydrate in their diet and their blood sugar is too high. Where does that blood sugar come from? Well, if you're not eating it, it means that your body is making it from something else. Now, the questions we want to answer are, hello, health champions. Isn't it funny how some people say that you have to eat sugar and carbohydrate in order to generate blood sugar for your brain? And yet there are a lot of people who eat zero carbohydrate in their diet and their blood sugar is too high. Where does that blood sugar come from? Well, if you're not eating it, it means that your body is making it from something else. Now, the questions we want to answer are, how does the body make sugar from other things? Where does it come from? What type of foods? And why does it matter? Even though most people change the way they're eating, change their lifestyle or their diet because they want to change their weight, they want to lose weight for the most part, there is more to it because the same mechanisms that drive weight up are also associated with type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, and disease. And the things we're trying to change are blood sugar and insulin. We're trying to lower blood sugar, lower insulin. And you can find both of these markers on your blood test. But in order to change the blood test till next time, you want to understand what sort of foods are increasing those so that you can reduce those foods. So to help with that,
น้ำอะโวคาโดใส่ไป3 ช้อนนะ
something called the
มันไม่เป็นเสียว
glycemic
อะโวคาโด
index
ก็ใส่
and
น้ำ
insulin
เบอร์เกอรี่
index.
บัว
Now, the glycemic index is virtually useless because they only created these values in glycemic index for things that contain carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are not the only thing that can drive up blood sugar and insulin. Other reason it's useless is that they've only tested high glycemic foods, such as carbohydrates. So they set a value for glucose, which has 0 fat, 0 protein, and 100% of calories, 100% of the weight is carbohydrate. And therefore, it has a very high glycemic index and a very high insulin index. But then they compare that to foods that have slightly less glycemic index. So bread is in the 70s, but that's still an extremely high glycemic index. And that's why we don't want to pay too much attention to glycemic index, because what they call low isn't really low. Problem with the insulin index is that the data is almost non-existent. The idea of the insulin index is very, very good, because insulin is really what we're looking for, but there's so little data to go by. So in this video, we're going to talk about the mechanisms so that we understand and we can look past the numbers, because you don't want to really look in tables after insulin index, because when they test it, people react differently, and some of those numbers are quite questionable. So if we look at skim milk, that's a product where they have removed the fat. It has all the original protein and carbohydrate. So carbohydrates are dominating in skim milk, and therefore the glycemic index is pretty close to that of glucose. It's not real close, but it's fairly high. The insulin index is much, much lower because the carbohydrates in milk is called lactose, which is broken down much, much slower. So some of this insulin index comes from carbohydrate, which is broken down slowly, and from protein, glycemic foods, such as carbohydrates. So that's associated with type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, and disease. And the things we're trying to change are blood sugar and insulin. We're trying to lower blood sugar, lower insulin. And you can find both of these markers on your blood test. But in order to change the blood test till next time, you want to understand what sort of foods are increasing those so that you can reduce those foods. So to help with that, they have created something called the glycemic index and the insulin index. Now the glycemic index is virtually useless because they've only created these values in glycemic index for things that contain carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are not the only thing that can drive up blood sugar and insulin. Other reason it's useless is that they've only tested high glycemic foods, such as carbohydrates. So they set a value for glucose, which has 0 fat, 0 protein, and 100% of calories, 100% of the weight is carbohydrate. And therefore, it has a very high glycemic index and a very high insulin index. But then they compare that to foods that have slightly less glycemic index. So bread is in the 70s, but that's still an extremely high glycemic index. And that's why we don't want to pay too much attention to glycemic index, because what they call low isn't really low. Problem with the insulin index is that the data is almost non-existent. The idea of the insulin index is very, very good, because insulin is really what we're looking for, but there's so little data to go by. So in this video, we're going to talk about the mechanisms so that we understand and we can look past the numbers, because you don't want to really look in tables after insulin index, because when they test it, people react differently, and some of those numbers are quite questionable. So if we look at skim milk, that's a product where they have removed the fat. It has all the original protein and carbohydrate. So carbohydrates are dominating in skim milk, and therefore the glycemic index is pretty close to that of glucose. It's not real close, but it's fairly high. The insulin index is much, much lower because the carbohydrates in milk is called lactose, which is broken down much, much slower. So some of this insulin index comes from carbohydrate, which is broken down slowly, and from protein, which is broken down even slower. When we look at whole milk, it has more fat, so it's going to have
เจี๊ยบไม่
most
เคย
of
แบ
the
บ
calories from
เรา
fat.
เคยผ่านมาแล้ว
Now
ไอ้
we
ที่
get
กิน
a
แล้วก็
glycemic index
อ้วก
that's
ออกมา
much lower,
มันเยอะเกิน
but we get
เกิน
a
มาแล้ว
somewhat lower insulin index.
อาจจะ
เจอครั้งแรก
A lot
เจอ
of
ครั้งแรก
the
ในชีวิต
protein is still
เท่านั้นนะ
there, but
ตอนอยู่คนเดียว
fat
ไง
is slowing it down.
เห็น
And when we look at full fat cream
จน
at
ล้วงคอที่เราบอกแกล้วง
37%,
ออก
ไปนอนปะ
then
หัว
the vast
ไม่ใช่
majority, way
นั่ง
over
นั่นแหละแต่ว่า
กินอะไร
90%
อ่ะ
of the calories are from
ก็
fat.
กินข้าวนั่นแหละแต่ว่ามัน
Glycemic
คนเดียวเหรอ
index is
หรือว่า
also
เพื่อน
quoted as
คนเดียว
zero,
อ๋อ
which
แต่ซื้อ
isn't
มาแบบอันนู้น
strictly,
ก็อย่าง
but
นี้
it's
ก็อ
really
ย่างมา
close to zero,
ทีนี้
and
มัน
the
แน่นต้อง
insulin
ไปล้วง
index
ออก
is very, very low. So the
ลำไส้
lesson
อาจ
is
จะยืด
that
แล้วก็ได้
carbohydrates drive it the most, both glycemic and insulin. Protein can drive it somewhat,
เรา
and
ถึงบอกให้
fat
แกล้วงคอ
slows
อ้ว
it
กไง
down. But what about these people on zero carb diets that still have high blood sugar? That is because of
ใช่ไหมเคยเป็น
gluconeogenesis.
อย่างนี้
The
มา
body
ก่อน
is
นะ
making glucose from
อ๋อ
something
บ้าแล้วทำไม
else.
เธอ
And oftentimes they
แต่
say
เธอ
that
ก็บอกแกไม่ได้เพราะตัวเองก็เคยเป็นนะ
contributes to gluconeogenesis, and it sort of does, but not really in my mind, because glycogen is
แล้วอ้วกออกมา
already glucose. You're not making it from scratch, and you're going to run
ก็ลำบาก
out
อยู่
of
อะตอนนั้นน่ะ
glycogen pretty quickly, and then your body has to
มันหายใจ
make
ไม่
it
ค่อยออก
from
นะ
something else. And your fat
แต่ว่าเราอ
is
ยู่คนเดียวไงเรา
bundled
ก็
with
นั่นแหละ
something
นอน
called glycerin that your body can make carbohydrates, make glucose from, and you can also make it from protein. Protein is made of little building blocks called amino acids, and they can be converted into glucose as well. And this is where I want to focus mostly today, to really understand how different types of protein are converted differently. They have different impact on glucose and insulin. The main purpose of protein is to become tissue. Ideally, that is why we eat protein. We want to turn it into body parts. And if we're successful, then we get muscles and bones and hair and skin and so forth. And they're primarily made up of protein. Now, the protein that doesn't turn into tissue, the excess, or the things that don't fit, the things we can't match and use for tissue, they become fuel. So the question is, which different proteins turn in more into tissue or more into fuel? Insulin's role in the body is storage, or anabolism, means building up. Insulin can build up fat tissues and muscle tissues. Insulin assists glucose into the cell, and this glucose gets converted to glycogen and stored, which we can only store a little bit, and then the rest gets turned into fat. But the same thing happens with amino acids. That amino acids also gets assisted into the cell by insulin, and then they get stored as protein, primarily as muscle. Now, we have to understand that this portion, the amino acid portion of stimulating insulin, its role in stimulating insulin is minuscule. It is so small that we can disregard it in our discussion here. The reason insulin gets triggered is by blood sugar. Now we need to understand a little bit about protein. So you eat food, it has protein, but your body has to break down the protein into amino acids. So if you look at this picture, these individual little components, these are molecules called amino acids, and then we string these together by the dozens, by the hundreds, by the thousands, and then they form proteins. And because of how these proteins have different charges, then these proteins fold themselves and create different shapes, and that is what's unique about protein. So we have to break these individual pieces down, because these can only pass across the intestinal membrane. They can only be absorbed one by one. If we don't break them down, we can't absorb them. And then once we've absorbed them, we are putting them back into other proteins that have specific purposes in the body. Even though there are hundreds or even thousands of amino acids, there are 20 that are used in the human body to configure these proteins. And out of these 20, there are 8 or 9 depending on who you talk to, that are essential, meaning that we have to add them in the diet. We have to eat them because the body can't make them. But if we eat these 8 or 9, then we can make the other for a total of 20. And the reason they don't know quite sure if it's 8 or 9 is that it seems histidine, which is the 9th one, can be made from the other 8. But today we'll just assume that there's 9 of them. We often hear about animal protein versus plant protein in terms of the protein being complete or not. And we also want to talk about how much, what percentage of the protein is being utilized. Does it turn into tissue, meaning it's utilized, or does it turn into glucose and fuel and drive insulin? And now we want to think of these 9 essential amino acids as building blocks or letters. So if you're going to spell out a 9-letter words, you need 9 different letters in this case, 9 essential amino acids. So this is a protein called prolamine. It has 9 letters, 9 different ones. But let's say that you're missing 1 letter. You have 8 letters, you don't have the 9th one. And now you go to spell a 9-letter word. You're going to build a protein with 9 essential amino acids. How many of those words, how many of those amino acids can you build? And the answer is 0. You cannot spell this word unless you have that letter. And what this means then is all of the other amino acids gets turned into glucose. And that means this protein is not complete. And that's why it's so important to eat a variety of foods, especially if you are a vegan or vegetarian. But it doesn't stop there. We also have to understand utilization. And this depends on if these amino acids occur in the right ratios. So let's say that we have 2 of this amino acids and 4 of this and 3 of the O's and 6 of the L's and so on. And now we go to spell as many words as we can, as many 9-letter words. We're trying to make this particular word. How many can we make? Well, obviously, the lowest denominator, the 2, we have 2 A's and 2 P's, so we can spell the word 2 times. And all of the other amino acids are going to be converted into glucose because they get left over. For this particular word, we can only use the combination of these amino acids twice. They may be used for some other proteins down the road, but for this particular case, most of it, this amount, gets converted into glucose. And here is how they measure this stuff. It's called protein utilization. So it's very, very simple. Protein has something called nitrogen in it that doesn't occur in fat or carbohydrates. So you ingest a certain amount of protein, 100% of what you ingest, and then they measure how much of this nitrogen is excreted. They know how much nitrogen you ate, and then they measure how much went out in the urine, and the conclusion is whatever stayed in the body is being utilized as building blocks, becomes tissue. And like we said, that's the purpose, is to become tissue, so that's the utilized portion. One of the best foods in terms of utilization is a whole egg. Almost half, 48% of the protein gets utilized, 52% become excreted. When we look at animal meat products like meat, fish, poultry, pork,
Okay.
Ôi, đẹp.
กินตัวถูกครับ
Virtually any animal protein, they're going to be very, very close, right around 32%, right about 1/3. And then when we look at whey, soy, and plant proteins, they are only 17% absorbed, only about 1/6. Whey is a dairy protein, but it's processed. It's only a portion of the protein in dairy. Soy is often quoted as the most complete plant protein. That some say that it's better than animal products, but because of these amino acid ratios, it's only used 17% of it. And the same goes for virtually any protein powder, whether it's hemp or pea protein or rice protein, only a fraction gets used and becomes tissue. The rest of it becomes glucose and will drive insulin. So the only other issue I want to talk about is overeating, because that is also a huge factor. Even if you eat something that's supposed to be highly utilized, but you eat way, way, way more than the body can use, there's only so much protein that fits into your body's amino acid pool that can circulate in the blood. And once you go beyond that, then any excess will be turned into glucose and fuel and be burned, because your body can only use so much at a time. But now it gets really, really interesting. Now let's start understanding some of these principles. We said a whole egg is one of the best ones. It gets used at about 48%. But here's the kicker. Egg white only gets used about 17%. Why is that? Because when we look at their composition and we start understanding how the body uses this, egg white is virtually all protein. And it has a very high glycemic index of 55. What most people don't realize is egg yolk actually has more protein than egg white. People throw away the egg yolk and they think, oh, egg white, that's the good,
ไข่
that's
แดง
the
มีโปรตีน
protein
มากกว่าไข่ขาว
stuff.
เธอ
But it turns out the egg yolk has more protein, but it doesn't stop there. The egg yolk has the pieces, the amino acids that are missing in the egg white, and that is why the egg white is only partially used, but the whole egg is used to a much, much higher degree, and therefore the insulin index is 21 versus 55. The utilization is 48 versus 17. So 83% of the egg white gets turned into glucose, and that's why it drives so much insulin. Now let's look at a few other foods. And remember I said that there's so little data on this. They started looking at this in 1997, and there's only been a handful of studies, and they're very incomplete. So there's a lot of discrepancy in the numbers. Beef has been quoted all the way from 15 to 51 on the insulin index, and fish has been quoted all the way from 12 to 59. And we can't really find out what type of beef or what type of fish. They won't tell us how much fat was in there. So it seems very unlikely if something has 0 carbs and similar protein that they would vary this much. And then we look at another list and we see cod comes in at 12. We see chicken is at 17, hot dog at 16, bologna 11, and bacon 9. So these numbers are all very consistently low, and we see that they have 0 or low carbs. They have similar amount of proteins, except the processed hot dog and bologna, which has less because it has other stuff in it. So basically we see that they're relatively consistent, low numbers, and the proteins are similar, and the fat slows it down. And nowhere could I find any numbers on ground beef. None at all. So I try to estimate some numbers based on our understanding now. We know that most animal products, fish, beef, chicken, they all seem to be utilized at about 30%. So that means 70% gets converted to glucose. We also know that fat slows it down. So we look at something like chicken at one end of the scale, and we look at bacon on the other. They have similar amounts of protein, but the fat slows it down. Now, if we look at something like 30% fat ground beef, then the ratios of fat and protein are similar to the bacon. The only difference really is the ground beef has a little more moisture to it. So the numbers, the insulin index, should be very, very similar. So I just said, in my estimate here, in my opinion, I think that number would be somewhere between 8 and 12. If we look at 20% fat in the ground beef, that should be a little bit higher because there's less fat to slow it down, and there's a little bit more protein by percentage, so maybe 10 to 15. If we look at ground beef with 15% fat, it's a little bit higher, and if we look at lean ground beef, we might get up to about 15-20, which would be similar to the range of chicken. If you enjoyed this video, then that would be a great one next. If you want to understand more about how the body works and how to... Hello, health champions. Isn't it interesting how so many people will go to great lengths to protect themselves and their children from harm and danger and accidents, and yet they will fill their pantries and fridges with food that is guaranteed to hurt them. And the reason we do that is that we're confused between urgent and important. So, better said by John Howe, one of my favorite quotes, "What a folly to dread the thought of throwing away life at once, and yet have no regard to throwing it away by parcels and piecemeal." And that's the reason the foods in this video are the 10 most dangerous foods, because they are the primary way that we throw our lives away by parcels and piecemeal. Number 1 on the list is processed grains, and in particular white bread made from modern wheat. And why is that so bad? Because that has virtually nothing in common with the grains that develop naturally on the planet. This one has been hybridized and developed not to be good for you, but to give high yields and to make big, white, fluffy loaves. So it's all about appearance and quantity, not about nutrition. Next, they process it, so they throw away most of the nutrition and just keep the starch. Then they add some preservatives, some sugar in some cases, and more chemicals like dough conditioners and texture enhancers and all these different things. And then when millions of people start feeling bad as a result of eating this, now they have to blame it on something. And as a result, we have gluten being the villain in bread. And I'm not a fan of gluten, but it's not the only problem with bread or with starch. So, as a result, now gluten is the villain. A whole industry has developed of gluten-free products. And therefore, in the marketing, if gluten is the villain, then everything else is a health food. And that's, of course, not how it works. Because when they take out the wheat and they put something else in, sometimes that other thing is worse in some ways. So the potato starch and the tapioca starch and the rice flour and the corn starch and all those things they add in, they don't have gluten, but very often they're even more processed and will sometimes give you even higher blood sugar spikes and insulin responses. So if you're gluten sensitive, of course you want to stay away from it, and you might have an occasional gluten-free product. Just realize it doesn't make it a health food. Number 2 on the list is kid cereals. And if it's not the first one, it's usually one of the first ingredients is sugar or high fructose corn syrup or corn syrup solids or one of those things. And then, of course, we find wheat and corn and some of the other offenders, which are pure starch, and they're very, very common allergens. Then they add some more coloring,
Madam
some
Bill.
artificial flavoring, and some more chemicals, and again, preservatives. And I think most people, if they look at this honestly, even without knowing that, they're not going to look at that and think it has any resemblance to actual food. And then, of course, what do we serve it with? We serve it with skim milk, and that is another one of these very common allergens, and we removed the fat, which was probably the only thing in there that didn't cause much of a reaction. But let's talk a little bit more about why we pay so much attention to avoiding the urgent dangers, but we pay so little attention to the long-term important things. And there are 2 huge
proud of
reasons.
myself.
The first one is that we are wired that way. That from your genetics and from your conditioning, your nervous system is wired to pay attention to things that can kill you and hurt you. That's just
Okay,
part
everyone,
of
bye-bye.
who you are.
See you
So
next live
the
stream.
nervous system will detect
Maybe tomorrow.
change. If
Exercise
you're
in the
looking at
morning.
something that's not moving, that there's not much change, then your brain kind of settles
Rah!
down and you go into a daze and you lose attention.